Welcome, everyone, to Smug and Play, the internet's premier mid-90s PC gaming video show slash podcast slash whatever we're doing this week. And on the show, we play through the games released in the mid and late 90s, month by month, so we can have a sort of historical appreciation and context for the incredible achievements in interactive entertainment, the developments in 3D graphics and such. We've arrived now in August of 1995, and this is a very, very, very special month for this podcast. This is where the name of this podcast ultimately is derived from. August 95 is...
the release of Windows 95.
Finally!
Ta-da! We did it!
We did it! We started all the way back in December of 1994 so that we could play through every single PC game or demo CD-ROM. But really the point of this show is to talk about this era of unbridled creativity, and a lot of that was made possible by the advancements of Microsoft's Win 9X series of operating systems, and the first one has finally been released. It was released to manufacturers around mid-month, I believe August 24th is the release date for the retail version, and interest was significant.
It was big.
It was big.
I mean, I'm younger than you even, so but it was a huge media frenzy, but also it was a big party for retail. I think I remember, and
yes.
Even I don't think video game consoles even in that day had a huge release thing because they kind of came out in a staggered. The inventory was low at the beginning.
Yeah.
But this was there were lines of people at every mall into their CompUSA or whatever,
right,
waiting for this thing. And there's a famous photo of this pirate dude holding two copies. He was so excited he didn't pirate the second license. He
That's
bought
right.
two copies.
He wanted to have two licenses in the clear, everything above board. He wanted to show the Windows 95 team how much he appreciated their efforts. And I think this is a significant release for so many different reasons, for technical reasons, for marketing reasons, for perception reasons, for positioning reasons. Windows 95 is finally the sort of consumer operating system that is available to more or less the masses. I mean, PCs are still very exclusive, still very expensive. This is not something that everyone is participating in, but if you look at the Macintosh lineup, those are really high-end, expensive machines. And Macintosh has had System 7 since 1991, with long file names, with drag and drop, with easy access to your file systems and rearranging the files, with a windowing system that's fairly robust with multi-finder. You have cooperative multitasking in Mac OS 7. So System 7 is known, it's out there, but it's not something that everybody has access to. But the promise of Windows 95 is on commodity PC hardware, you can now get an experience, a modern graphical user interface experience that's going to enable you to get so much more value and even enjoyment out of your computer. So how actually was it out the door, Alan? How was that retail 1.0 to use?
How was it to use?
Well, we know what the promise is, right? Did they deliver with that 1.0?
I think it was pretty awesome. It's one of those things where I think we look at it more negatively now than we did when it came out. So I think now we think of it as a very buggy release.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there were all these GUI apps, and it kind of held together all right. At least in Windows 95, if one of your apps decided to, follow a null pointer or something, it would pop up a thing that says hey, we're gonna have to kill this.
Yeah.
And usually it recovered after that.
Yeah.
And so I think we saw this as this is the best GUI we've seen. It actually looks nicer than macOS 7.
I think
I
that,
would say.
I think that's a matter of personal preference. I think Windows 95 gives a little bit too much space in those big, gray, boxes that they wrap everything in, all the start menu
Yeah,
items.
but compared to like 3.1, it was I mean, just having
Yeah.
a close button on every window was very
Yes,
nice.
I was recently using Windows 3.1 for this show and had forgotten that
Mm.
there's no freaking close button. Like, you got to go File, Exit, and everything is just a total pain. So, a lot of niceties that we expect from operating systems, from graphical user interfaces, are finally available to us, right? We have long file name support. We have um, we have a wizard that steps you through driver installation. We have on supported hardware plug and play, which can automatically configure the hardware details like interrupts and DMA settings that before you slap a new board in, or or you install a new piece of software, you have to specify everything. So you have to really have a deep understanding of the computer, which limits, again, the number of people who can participate in personal computing. Um, so one of the things you mentioned was stability, and in multitasking, are at least this sort of back and forth multitasking, and Microsoft had this really solid Office suite with Excel and Word and things like that, but they really
I think that
played.
was the big selling point.
It's
I mean,
finally something
Word,
that
Excel.
tied those big Office programs together well. But previously, the Macintosh versions of those things worked better because of the underlying operating system allowed you more easily manipulate the files that they created, import things back and forth between them, find destinations for them in terms of fax or print, desktop publishing. Windows 3.1 didn't tie these different utilities together very well, but Windows 95 definitely does. And so, as you said, if you use an application that uses the Windows 32 APIs, you get actual protected memory between applications. So one Windows 32 app goes down, it doesn't take out all the other ones. Now, this is not true of Windows 16 applications. So if you have multiple Win 16 apps running and one of those crashes, it will take out every single other Windows 16 app. And it's actually, DOS is handled in an interesting way. DOS is handled in virtual machines. So DOS, each one of those things runs in its own VM, so DOS things won't take out other DOS things or other Windows things. But this is this bizarre heterogeneous architecture that they've come up with for the purposes of backwards compatibility, which is,
Yeah.
on the one hand, brilliant. This is why this operating system succeeded, right? Because you can still run all your DOS stuff. You can still run all your Windows 3.1 stuff. And you can access these new Win32 apps specifically for the 9X series that have all these advantages. But there's a downside as well to this great backwards compatibility, in addition to the complexity of it. But there's also the problem that there's very little incentive at this point for developers to adopt the new Win32 APIs because there's a small percentage of the user base which is on Windows 95 and a larger percentage that's on Windows 3.1 and a still larger percentage of people who have access to DOS through one of these other operating systems. So if you're making a game and you want to be able to deliver to the biggest audience, you still want to target DOS. If you're making a graphical user interface program, desktop publishing app or something like that, you still want to target Windows 3.1 using the 16-bit Windows API because you want to have that bigger, audience. And so if those are the apps you're using, you're not getting any of these great features that Windows 95 brings to the table, like preemptive multitasking, protected memory, really, hot stuff, considering that, Macintosh System 7 came out in 91, doesn't have preemptive multitasking. Apple's trying to come up with some sort of, new generation OS that's going to have it, but they don't ship another operating system until 1997, and it's only Mac OS 8, and it doesn't really bring much new to the table. Like, Apple's just spinning its wheels right now for this whole period while Microsoft is making these, measured advances.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of the very technical details of stability. I feel like,
I want to make sure that our
and,
audience is entertained.
yeah, it's interesting though. I feel like a lot of it though came down to just the drivers you had installed, and to some extent the quality of the hardware you had. I reflected on this a lot because LGR posted a video about Windows Millennium, and we all remember hating that operating
Yeah.
system and thinking of it as unstable. But with good hardware that actually had drivers written by adults,
Are you
it
saying
actually.
are you saying that certain audio card manufacturers may have hired child labor, to write their INFs and things, and wrote their VXD drivers? I wouldn't put it past some of them.
I wouldn't be
I
surprised.
would not be surprised. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like actually when Windows 95 first came out, it was because nobody had any drivers other than the ones that came with Windows. It was sort of stable for a while,
Yeah.
and then when things got more advanced, like we had, fancy 3D accelerators and sound cards, then the drivers, they were trying to do a lot, and that led to a lot of instability. So again, my initial perception, I think, of Windows 95 is different than the way I
Yeah.
see it now.
It's sort of
But
deteriorated. Yeah, I mean, when you bought it, the CD had all the drivers for all the stuff that you likely owned, and
Yeah.
you installed them, and it worked well because they were all Microsoft certified. And it wasn't just random stuff that you had downloaded, from the manufacturer or gotten on a manufacturer floppy or something like that. So, yeah, I think that for the most part, the out-of-the-box experience was great. But once you had that, you really wanted to extend, right? Like, you really wanted to see what there was. And, out of the gate, not all of the APIs we associate with Windows 9X were available. Direct3D has been hinted at. There's been an acquisition of this company called Rendermorphics. They're working on their 3D APIs, and we don't quite have those yet. And I think that's okay for Microsoft because their play is really initially for the office, but I mean, because they've made it more user friendly, there's also a play for the home, and so it's not yet clear how multimedia is going to materialize on this platform. It's been suggested. It's clear that Microsoft is working on it, but it hasn't happened yet. And I don't think it's going to happen in 95. It's really not going to start to happen until 96. And then when all those different things start happening, 3D accelerators start landing, then we're going to start to see some interesting instability.
Yeah, I mean, this is a games show, so we should mention what games you could play in
what can you
August 95. Well, the CD version of Windows has Hover. Hover with, sorry, exclamation mark.
Yes. Hover!
Which is a hover car driving game that's pretty much uncontrollable. And then sort of the backgrounds are like this Wolfenstein 3D kind of world of big walls.
Doesn't it have levels, though? Like, aren't there little, like ramps and things you can go up? I remember spending...
That's true.
I remember spending some time with it. Yeah, that was one of the big things. I don't know if it was the original Windows 95 retail or if it was one of the OSR discs, but in addition to that, there were some music videos you could watch.
Yeah, the retail release had Weezer, Buddy Holly, and Good Times, Bad Times or something. I don't remember that artist.
Yeah. I remember watching that Weezer video a lot,
Yeah. I mean, having video, full motion video that length was kind of new.
Yeah, in some form.
Yeah. Anyway, back to games. 3D Pinball Space Cadet was included with Plus.
Yes.
So
we'll talk about
if you had a good OEM that bundled with Plus, you had the best game of all time, 3D Pinball Space Cadet.
And Jennifer Aniston did a good Let's Play of that in a video that we'll talk about soon.
Because I
think it's very important.
It's very, very
important that we talk about that. So
what else? Fury 3 that we talked about came out August 31st. So that was a game that you could play.
Yeah.
And DOS support was pretty good, I thought, for games.
Yeah.
Almost everything would play unless it did some really funky real mode wizardry.
But recent DOS stuff worked, and I think there was built-in support for specific games with PIF files that would make sure that they properly configured the memory and other things for the game to play. But yeah, I mean, those things work surprisingly well. And of course, you couldn't launch DOS software from Windows 3.1. This was a huge improvement in that respect. And of course, you still had MS-DOS mode if you needed to kick down to that. So overall, for games, it's not suddenly a huge leap forward. It's not like it suddenly makes available this great software library, and there aren't a lot of differentiating features. But in terms of like the user experience that it is that's foreshadowing or that's previewing to people, playing DOS games on this show, man, it's really worn on me having to configure my sound card in every single piece of software that I run. There's nothing shared, there's no shared configuration. And that's a problem not just for, the users, but also for the developers who have to pick their DOS extender, and they have to pick what sound engine they're using, and they have to bundle in a sound setup program. And maybe if it's a bigger publisher like Sierra or like, 3D Realms, maybe they put together something that is easy to use and like has good auto config. But if they're a smaller developer, maybe their auto config, hangs to your machine or it doesn't exist, and it's every single piece of software that you run is a learning experience in DOS. And developers worked around those limitations and created incredible works that we're going to continue to see, because DOS gaming is going to be the core of PC gaming for the next few years here. But the experience of something like Hover, the CD auto plays and you click play and you don't have to configure anything at all. You can just play the game, is an experience that is so much closer to console gaming of the era and the kind of gaming that we expect now. So it is notable and wonderful for that reason alone.
I remember being very positively surprised by the DOS emulation. I thought, being Microsoft product, we thought it would sort of work, but it worked pretty well out of the box. And obviously, compared to Windows 3.1, you couldn't play really any DOS games. It was a big leap that you could just boot up into Windows 95 and roll with that all day. So
the retail release comes out August 24th. People are mobbing stores. They get this thing. They're installing software. Later down the road, they're buying Windows 95 specific software. But what is the future of Windows 95? Where does Windows 95 lead us? Because there's no Windows update. This is something that's conspicuously missing from the start menu.
And they actually did a lot of updates, but they just never gave it to the end user. New PCs, got some of the updates through OEMs, but nobody else. Now it's kind of weird, right? And there were in total like 3 service pack releases that the first one fixed a ton of bugs, which again nobody got, or maybe something they installed dropped a DLL from it to give some of that functionality. But and then the rest of them were new technology like AGP, USB, that just didn't have any support in the original operating system. I think this was a big bummer and kind of sad. If you watch anybody on YouTube, it's like, let's see how Windows 95 is like in 2020. They all install OSR 2 or 2.5, and it's almost reasonable. It's actually pretty close to Windows 98, I think. Whereas, again, what people are actually running is a much more buggy and unstable thing. And I think the reason that it annoys me the most is that there's this big problem with Windows in this era called DLL hell, where there are these libraries that provide all this code that's running in your operating system, and unfortunately any installer in this era could just plop down whatever version they wanted, and obviously there were serious incompatibilities between if you had file A at version 2 and file A at version 3, then it could all fall apart. And I think Microsoft made it a lot worse here because as time went on, 96, 97, people didn't want to write code against this crappy old original Windows 95, so they would just plop down whatever libraries they wanted with their software, and it led to all sorts of unintended consequences, which is another reason why, again, initially I think Windows 95 worked.
Yeah.
But as the years went on and you installed more software, just stuff would start breaking.
Sometimes when you started up, you had a consistent set of DLLs. Like everything had been tested against each other, the same version. Yeah, but I mean, and the thing is, it wasn't just third parties who were guilty of this. Microsoft themselves, with the different DirectX releases, those weren't properly versioned until, I believe, DirectX 7. The earlier DirectXs just plopped down DLLs on top of the previous version of DirectX, and so what could easily happen is you install a game that was made a year ago or something like that, and it wants this version of DirectX Direct 3D. It goes and just paves over the previous installation of DirectX Direct 3D. Now you're gone from 4 back to 2, and you try to go and play a newer game that you had installed earlier, it doesn't run, or it's broken in some way, and you have to go back and install 4 over that, and then you have to, the other game refuses to run because it doesn't have 2 anymore, and then you have to see if you can maybe coerce it into running on Direct 3D 4, and yeah, you end up in DLL hell, where not just every application, every driver that you install wants to plop down whatever it thinks the best version of DLLs are, and you quickly end up in some sort of inconsistent state. And it's not Unix, folks. We don't have version shared objects with pointers to the most recent. It's just whatever's in the folder is what we're going to execute, and let's hope that everything knows how to talk to each other.
Yeah. What else do you remember about Windows 95?
I remember Microsoft Bob, the ultimate, the ultimate front end, because the ultimate in skeuomorphic design, like the thing that would cause Johnny Ive to have a complete vomit fest, or they were worried that people didn't understand the files and folders desktop metaphor. That's not appropriate for people who aren't technical or aren't office workers. So we're going to come up with, a desktop metaphor that doesn't make any sense at all, which is rooms. It's like your house. Your rooms in your house. So you're going to put, you're going to arrange your games, sort of in a game room with maybe a pool table, and put in your home office. That's where you'll arrange the icons for Excel and Word. And I remember we would you could drag and drop in different clip arts and things like that. We had a basement. There's a basement backdrop, I think, and you could drag and drop in all these fireplaces and things. So we tried to make some sort of gateway to hell out of fire clip art, and then you could put Doom and Doom 2 in there. So that was a good addition.
Yeah. Bob was mostly annoying for DOS games because when you exited, the palette would be completely messed up. So it was completely unusable to us. But Bob. I mean, this is the era where Microsoft was introducing Clippy, and then Bob had this dog that they also introduced, which is a similar kind of virtual assistant. And it was just, there were too many inefficient ways of doing the same thing, and it just became really cluttered, starting around this time. It was ugly.
Yeah, but I have fond memories of games that were beginning to add 95 support. If MechWarrior 2 recently was released, and they would follow on with a Windows 95 version of that very quickly. And Command & Conquer is going to be released soon. They would release a Command & Conquer 95 version.
Although we should say that being an actual gamer during this time, those Windows 95 versions needed kind of twice the hardware power as DOS versions because of all the abstraction and virtualization that Windows is doing. We in '96 actually we got this fancy laptop well, it wasn't fancy. It was kind of like a budget laptop. But budget was a $3,000 laptop at that point.
Right. It used an
And
AMD processor
yeah,
instead
and it
of
used an AMD processor that's really a 486 under the hood, and you just couldn't play Windows 95 games. We would always have to boot into DOS, and then you could play Command and Conquer capably in DOS. So, there was a cost associated. I mean, at this time, like August 95, there wasn't really worth playing your game in Windows 95 mode.
It's when games start to use, higher level abstraction libraries like MiniGL, and that stuff's only available in Windows, that suddenly becomes more attractive to gamers and to developers who want to use these higher end libraries, and that starts kind of shifting development away from DOS and into 95, and that's really pushed forward by 3D accelerators, and 3D accelerators are not really a thing yet, but we're going to see that happen.
But
soon.
we'll have an update in October 95 with some of the DirectX early glimpses, which you should look out for because it has Bill Gates in one of his most iconic video roles.
Yes, we talked about that. When he's not dancing, there are other things he can do. So look out for that. I think at this point, it would be good to check out some of the games on PC Gamer's August 95 CD.
August 95.
Basically none of which are for Windows, but...
Virtual Anus was for Windows
3.1. I installed that. I'll show it to you if you like, but it's basically malware that the author wants you to pay for.